Welcome to the virtual roadshow series on Channelchek. Today we are featuring Newrange Gold, OTC ticker symbol NRGOF, TSXV ticker symbol NRG. Research coverage of Newrange Gold is provided by Noble Capital Markets. Noble is a FINRA licensed SEC registered broker-dealer. All Noble research is available on Channelchek. Following the formal presentation, Mark Reichman, the Noble senior analyst covering Newrange Gold, will ask our presenter a selection of the questions received. The source of the questions will remain anonymous. And now, here is Robert Archer, CEO of Newrange Gold, to make the presentation. Robert, take it away.
Thanks very much, and welcome everyone, and thanks to Channelchek for hosting this roadshow series. I'm pleased to be able to present Newrange Gold to you today. Firstly, of course, I would encourage everyone to do their own due diligence before investing. There's lots of good information on the website, and you can always contact the company directly. So just at a very high level, Newrange is focused in Nevada, and the company presents a unique opportunity because we're earning an interest in a project that used to be a producing gold district in Nevada going back to the late 1800s. And at that time, this was one of the highest grade gold districts in Nevada. And then it was consolidated by a Dodge family at that time, and then passed on to a couple of other families, such that the property has been privately held since 1896. And so it's seen very little modern exploration, and this is something that is quite unique in Nevada, and presents a terrific opportunity for us to advance the project using modern exploration methods. In addition to that, we've recently picked up a project in the Red Lake area of northwestern Ontario, which many people will be familiar with. It's a very hot area at the moment, a very prolific district in its own right. And I'll tell you more about that as we go forward. The company is well financed for 2020 and even into early 2021. We have been monetizing our non-core assets in Colombia from where the company was previously working, and we're trying to keep dilution to a minimum by doing that. So that's providing funding for the current programs, as well as the exercise of warrants and options. And the company, importantly, is led by a team of successful company builders, mine finders. We've got collectively well over 100 years of experience. Myself, I joined as a director in March of 2018, then as CEO of January of 2019. I co-founded Great Panther Mining in 2004 and built that company to 2017 when I stepped down as CEO. And the company is now a mid-tier gold and silver producer with operating mines in Mexico and South America. And my colleague, Robert Carrington, who is a co-founder of Newrange, has worked extensively in Nevada, lives in Reno, and he oversees the project from that location while I work out of British Columbia and look after the capital markets side of things. So we try to keep our G&A very low and try to get as much money into the ground as possible. So speaking of being on the ground, here we are in Western Nevada on what's called the Walker Lane Trend. And as many people will be familiar, Nevada is the 5th largest gold producer in the world. The largest in the United States. It's the 3rd most desirable mining jurisdiction in the world, according to the Fraser Institute. And in 2018, produced a little over 5.5 million ounces of gold. Has a very, very prolific history. And particularly in the Walker Lane trend on the western side, this is a very prolific trend in its own right, with some very familiar names such as Comstock Lode, Tonopah, Round Mountain, Round Mountain itself, owned by Kinross, just to the east of our project, is one of the largest gold mines in the world, with past production and reserves somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million ounces. So Walker Lane has produced over 53 million ounces, and it's an extremely good address for us to be working in. So this is very much elephant country. And just before I leave this slide, I just want to point out the little inset there with the sample of visible gold. This is was taken from the property, from Pamlico. It was actually found in one of the dumps, covered in mud. It's been sitting there for many decades. And this is the sort of material that the old timers had been chasing. And one of the reasons why it was one of the highest grade gold districts at that time in the late 1800s. So just focusing in a little bit more on Pamlico. So this is essentially, we like to think of it as a new discovery of an older district. It's hosted in volcanic rocks. Everything is close to surface, sometimes even exposed at surface, and this is why it was discovered and mined by the old timers. The ore is oxidized such that it is very amenable to leaching, and we've conducted some preliminary metallurgical studies which indicate that the metallurgy is exceptional, with recoveries up to 97%. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about that and why that's important. But as I mentioned, this is a very unique opportunity to explore an older district, and we have an option to earn 100% on this from the family, the Merritt family that currently owns it. We're just off the major highway between Reno and Las Vegas, so we have excellent infrastructure. County road crosses the property. There's a power line that crosses the property, and the property itself is really district scale. So we have lots of room to maneuver and to expand if we need to. And at present, there are multiple targets that we're working on at the moment. So just to take a look at a few of those, we have been focusing for the most part down on the southwestern side along what's called Pamlico Ridge and the Merritt Zone and into Gold Box Canyon. And that's where most of the old mine workings are, and a little bit up into the central mine area just to the north of that. But we recently expanded the property to the east, and you can see where it looks like the targets stop, but really that's just because we recently acquired those claims and haven't really done a lot of work out in that area yet. It's also out into the valley where there's not much outcrop exposure, but you can see the road coming down from the highway crossing through that part of the property. So we have multiple targets there, and you can see on the right how most of these do have gold mineralization either at surface or from drill holes. There's the one area called the Merritt Decline. A decline is essentially a tunnel or a ramp that goes down into the earth. It's about 200 meters or 600 feet long. And we sampled the insides of that and then drilled some holes around the near the end of that as well, and tell you a little bit more about that. So essentially, since taking on the project in 2016, the company has been conducting most of the basic type of exploration work that a company would do these days, such as property-wide geophysical surveys. As I mentioned, we sampled the inside of the decline. We've been conducting surface mapping, sampling, and trenching, as well as surveying and sampling the underground workings. And this is important because we have surveyed more than 300 mine openings going into the hillsides, and we estimate that there is somewhere in the neighborhood of 8,000 kilometers, about 5,000 miles of underground tunnels. Now, you think of these tunnels as horizontal drill holes in the sense that you can sample the insides and you get a wealth of information that's basically provided to us free of charge. And we've spent basically a year and a half surveying and sampling the insides of these tunnels because there was no previous information on this. And in addition to that sampling information that we're getting, we also now know where most of these tunnels are located. Of course, that's important such that we try not to drill into them once we get into the drill program like we are now. So We've conducted some metallurgy and transferred the permits for an underground bulk sample should we decide to go that route. And more recently, December and January, we conducted an induced polarization geophysical survey, which was extremely useful in interpreting the geology. So just coming back to this tunnel that I mentioned, the Merritt decline, you can see where it starts on the left at the portal and then goes down at an angle into the ground. And you can see on the right some of the values that we've been getting in the sampling of the walls of that tunnel, such that we're averaging about 75.5 meters of almost 3 grams per ton gold. And this is very close to surface. The end of that tunnel is only 60 meters below surface, so it's very, very close and amenable to open pit mining should we ever get to that stage. So this is just part of what the company did in the early days, followed up with some drilling in that immediate area. And what we found then at that time, this is 2017, was that we're getting some very high grades, up to 341 grams in individual samples. But in the order of an ounce, several ounces per ton over several meters. But just as importantly, perhaps more so, is that there was a halo of lower grade material around those high grade intercepts, such that we were getting wider areas of more modest grades of 1 to 5 grams, which is still very high grade for an open pit. So that caused us to rethink the whole model for the project as being more of an open pit type target as opposed to a high grade underground target. So we're thinking that what we might be looking at here are a series of higher grade pockets surrounded by lower grade material. And now it's really a question of trying to determine how many of these pockets there are, where they're located, what are the controls of the gold mineralization within them, what are the grades, how big are they, that sort of thing. And ultimately that comes down to more drilling. So this is just a quick cross section through the drilling that was done in 2017, basically just to illustrate what I was just mentioning, that these zones are fairly close to surface. You can see the hatched area here is only about 50 feet or about 15 meters below surface, so very, very close. It's all oxidized and be amenable to leaching, and you can see some of the grades, 45 grams, 65 grams, that sort of thing, surrounded by more low-grade material. So we need to further define these zones, where they go, and how they're controlled. So just a quick word on the metallurgy. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this, but suffice to say that we ran some preliminary tests, some cyanide shake assays and bottle roll tests that indicated that with the lower grade material, such as the chart on the left, was only 0.5 gram per ton. We're still getting very good recoveries of about 70% after only 24 hours. Whereas with the higher grade material, chart on the right, running about 98 grams per ton, we're getting recoveries almost 80% after 24 hours and up to 97% after 96 hours. So all of that indicates that recoveries will be very good, and this will be amenable to some kind of a leach processing, very low cost. The underground workings that I mentioned, we've been surveying using handheld LiDAR scanners. There's a laser scanner that you simply walk through the tunnels, holding this out in front of you, spins around, collects 300,000 data points per second, and it's a tremendous way to survey the inside of the tunnels and give us a 3D model of where these tunnels are, such as you can see on the left. And this is very useful for us in avoiding these with the drilling, as well as giving us a precise location of where all of our underground samples come from. So the area that we've been focusing on is what's known as Pamlico Ridge. The ridge itself is about 1.5 kilometers long, and there are a series of old mines along here, a few of which are noted here: the Pamlico Mine, Gold Bar Mine, Good Hope Mine. And you can see where we've sampled some of the insides of the Good Hope Mine, received some very good values up in the 13, 14 grams per ton range over several meters. And this is one of the areas, or this holes ridge area really is where we currently have a drill set up, and we're trying to drill down in between the old mine workings to get a better understanding of what's controlling the gold mineralization, how it's distributed, what the trends are, and so on. So we've drilled a number of holes on this so far, and the drilling is continuing. The IP that I mentioned has been important in the sense that we felt that the gold mineralization was associated with sulfides, with pyrite, typically small specks or what's called disseminated pyrite, and that is detected by this method of geophysics. Now, when the pyrite gets oxidized, it doesn't respond as well to IP. And since we're looking at a fairly deep oxidation level, we weren't initially sure just what the response would be. So we ran a few test lines, and you can see these on the left-hand side, sort of running northeast southwest. And what we saw there was that one of those lines, line 4, you can see where it crosses what's called the drill area. That's where the drilling that I showed you the section of from 2017 was conducted, and we did get a subtle anomaly right on top of that drill area, which is pretty much what you would expect where the sulfides have been oxidized. So that gave us some encouragement that the IP was going to work, and so we stepped out and drilled the 4 drilled the 4 east-west lines in the northern part of the property, and picked up a very, very strong anomaly through there that was deeper. And at that time, it was encroaching on the eastern boundary of the property, which you can see here in the light blue line. And so we increased the property holdings to the east, such as now shown in the red line. So that was the reason for expanding the property in that direction, and we haven't really done much more work out there. So you'll recall that there weren't any specific targets there at that moment. But nonetheless, the IP has worked for us, and this is just a colored representation of what the IP is showing. And you can see those same 8 lines, and how on the left-hand side, you can see that same line 4 with the drill area, a very subtle anomaly. You can just make out the little green contours sitting underneath that drill area, and from there, we're extrapolating that perhaps some of these other IP anomalies are also representing sulfides, which may be associated with gold mineralization. And the thought is that the large anomaly that we're seeing in the other 4 lines could potentially represent buried intrusive rock that may have sulfide mineralization associated with it, and that may have provided the source, the heat, and the fluids for the gold mineralization. So this is all very conceptual, theoretical at this point, but in exploration, you need to have some kind of a model to work with as to what you're actually facing. Otherwise, you're basically just drilling blind. And what we've seen in the drilling to date is that we have drilled a few holes on some of these IP anomalies that are a little closer to surface, and what we've seen is that there is indeed disseminated sulfide associated with these those ones that have been drilled, and such as this one in here on line 2, and then this more subtle one off here on line 1 just to the west, and excuse me, just this little sort of finger coming up through here on the western side of line 5. These all have intersected sulfide mineralization in the drill core, and I shouldn't say core, sorry, we're doing RC drilling, but in the drill chips. And we're just currently waiting on assays to come back from the lab for those holes. So we don't currently have results from those yet. So just a summary of the current drilling. We've drilled about 28 holes to date, just over 2,700 meters. And on this, what we call the first pass, this is really like a phase 4 drilling out of all the drilling we've done over the last few years. But this is about a 5,000 meter campaign, and we'll take a look at the results of that once we have everything in and decide how to proceed from there. But ultimately, we could drill up to about 10,000 meters in this whole program going up through the balance of the year. As I mentioned, we'll be drilling along Pamlico Ridge, and we did put out results from the first 14 holes a couple of weeks ago, and showed that, as anticipated, we are getting higher grade structures, in this case up to 9.5 grams, and surrounded by lower grade material, such that we're averaging out about 0.5 gram over 41 meters, which is right in the range of what you might consider mineable in Nevada, looking at some of the other mines that are in operation. So as the program goes along, we'll continue testing the IP anomalies, and then just working on putting all this together and trying to get a better understanding of the gold mineralization. Towards the end of the program, we'll probably transition to diamond drilling, which we'll use to test the deeper IP targets that are beyond the range of the reverse circulation. And also diamond drilling gives you better geological information, because you do get core as opposed to just little rock chips that are about the size of your fingernail. So that's where we stand right now. We are anticipating additional results coming out. We've received 14 holes. There are 11 holes that are currently in the lab, and we anticipate those results starting to come in hopefully this week, perhaps next week. And of course, once we've compiled and interpreted those, then we'll get those results out to the market as well. So just a brief word on our Red Lake project in Ontario. This is something that we've picked up just in December, January of this year. And Red Lake, as many people will be familiar with, is a very hot area right now. It's a very prolific area in its own right, having produced over 30 million ounces of gold over the last 90 years. And the Red Lake mine itself, which is initially owned by Goldcorp and Plasterdome, recently sold to an Australian company. But this is the mine that really started Goldcorp and built it into the company that it is today, or well, prior to getting taken over by Newmont, that is. So it's a very rich area. And we're located in what's called the Birch-Uchi Belt, just to the east of that. And Birch-Uchi Belt is about 3 times the size of the Red Lake Belt itself, but it's seen much less exploration because it doesn't have the same access. There's road access into Red Lake, but Birch-Uchi is fly-in only. Nonetheless, First Mining Gold says the Springpole deposit that they're developing, which is only about 12 kilometers away from our North Birch project. That's the largest deposit in the belt, although it's not in production yet. But there is a past producing mine just a few kilometers to the east of us called Argosy, which produced a little over 100,000 ounces at almost 13 grams. So we certainly know there's gold in the area. And the target that we're looking at here is what's called an iron formation hosted gold deposit, and very similar to the Musselwhite mine, 190 kilometers to the north of us, that is being operated by Newmont Goldcorp. This is about 8 million ounces of gold. And I'm very familiar with this since I worked at the Musselwhite mine, actually on the pre-feasibility study back in the mid-90s. So it's a model that I'm very familiar with, and I see the same pattern in the rocks here. And these can be very significant deposits once you find them, the largest being the Homestake mine in South Dakota, which is over 40 million ounces of gold. So essentially, we've got a large property, almost 4,000 hectares. We're earning 100% on this. There's several good targets. There is gold known in the area, but the iron formation itself, which you can see in this pinkish coloration, has never actually been drill tested. And we interpret the major structure coming through parallel to this, and with about 8 kilometer strike length. And this has never been drill tested. So that's the primary target. We had hoped to get in there this summer, but with all the COVID travel restrictions, we haven't been able to get in there yet, unfortunately. We may be able to still late summer, early fall. And if that's the case, we might be able to drill some holes this coming winter. But failing that, we'll have a very active program starting in the spring. So just in terms of upcoming catalyst news flow at Pamlico, I mentioned we're continuing with all the geological work, surface and underground, producing a model of the mineralized zones and drilling up to 10,000 meters, which we're almost a third of the way through that right now. At North Birch, we're reprocessing the geophysical data, refining the targets, and hoping to get in there soon to commence the surface program as well. And as I mentioned earlier on at the corporate level, we have been seeing some warrants and options getting exercised, and we have sold off our Colombian assets. We're still seeing some of those funds coming in. So that collectively is what's funding the programs in 2020 and on into the first part of 2021. We have 121 million shares on issue, and currently trading around the 21-cent level, and seen a bit of volatility recently with most of the juniors, but nonetheless, very good liquidity for a company our size, trading about 2.3 million shares a day in Canada and the US, most of that in Canada on the venture exchange. And partly because we're a very relatively tightly held company for having 120 million shares out. Insiders own 9%, institutions ranging from Europe, from Switzerland, London, Paris, through to North America and into Australia as well. So a good institutional holding for a junior company, and a lot of closely held loyal shareholders as well, owning a significant portion of the company. So that's Newrange. So just to reiterate, we are exploring the past producing high-grade Pamlico Gold District in Nevada. Has excellent infrastructure, exceptional metallurgy, with both open pit and underground potential. We've picked up a highly prospective project in the prolific Red Lake district, and well-experienced, successful management, and well-funded for exploration well into 2021. So with that, I'll wrap up and pass it over to Mark for the Q&A. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Mark Reichman, the Noble Senior Analyst who covers Newrange Gold. I will be reading the questions submitted for Bob's response. So the first question is, would you prefer to drill known high-grade areas, and how did you decide on where you would begin your drilling program?
Well, we wanted to explore the Pamlico Ridge area in more detail. The high-grade results that we hit in 2017 were down in a bit of a gully just coming off the ridge, but the old mine workings were in the ridge itself, and we had obtained some very good information from those underground workings, but there had been very little drilling on the ridge, mainly because previous holes, previous attempts, had intersected the old workings, which really doesn't help very much, because if you drill into an open stope, it typically means that the old timers already mined out the high grade. And there's also a very good chance that you can get the rod stuck, which is never good either. So we wanted to start working along the ridge to try and get as much information as we could around the old mine workings. And so that's really where the first 14 holes were drilled that we released, and we're continuing to drill along the ridge, and probably have another I'd say at least 20 holes probably to put along the ridge, and to try to get a better understanding of what's actually controlling the gold mineralization along there. And then of course testing the IP anomalies was another priority as well.
Next question is, please ask Bob to explain the nature of Nevada near-surface oxide deposits that may seem low grade but are very profitable to mine and may have millions of ounces. For example, the Round Mountain gold mine.
Yeah, well, one of the things about much of Nevada, such as Pamlico, is that it has very good infrastructure. We're just right off a major highway, so right off the bat, that keeps your costs down. The reason you can mine such low grades is that, as we've seen with our metallurgy, with recoveries up to 97%, just with low cost heap leach technology, this is, it really helps to keep your operating costs low. And, being close to surface and the rock is very soft and friable, breaks up easily. In some cases doesn't even need crushing. So you can essentially just go in and mine this with, with diggers and backhoes, front end loaders, that type of equipment, and just put it in the back of a truck, and then they drive it up onto the top of the leach pad, and that's it. So your mining costs are extremely low. And with open pit mining, you can often get economies of scale as well, because a lot of the deposits are much larger. You can have an operation in place that is mining tens of thousands, or in some cases hundreds of thousands of tons per day. So you do get those economies of scale. So low mining costs, low processing costs, good infrastructure, and those all add up to low-cost operation.
The next question is, how did the initial drilling results compare to your expectations, and what can investors expect from the remainder of the drilling program?
Yeah, the first results were really in line with our expectations, and when they came out, I spoke to all of our institutional investors as well, so around the world, and and they had the same reaction, that we know that the gold is more concentrated in some narrow high grade structures and veins, which is exactly what we saw. And that there are these halos of lower grade material in and around those, which again is what we saw from those results. And so I think they were in line with what we expected. It seemed that there were some retail investors that I'll say were more speculators than investors. People looking to make a quick buck in this type of a market. With the run up we've seen in junior mining shares, and so they were expecting perhaps more very high grade results such as we saw in 2017. But the reality is that we were drilling in a slightly different area. And there was really no reason to expect that the results would duplicate that. It's certainly nice to think that they could, and that potential is always there. But there's certainly no guarantee of that. It is exploration, and we're drilling in areas that haven't really been drill tested before. So the results are going to be variable, and it's quite possible that the next round of results that we get will have some very high grades in them, or they could be more similar to what we've just seen. So it's really just a question of trying to get a better understanding of it at this point.
Next question is, would you consider using a tool like Verify to make project data more easily accessible?
Yes, at some point, we can do that, and we are actually building a model in Leapfrog at the moment, which has, it's also very good for illustrative purposes, and you can have a little 3D model that you can rotate around and take a look at, and there are a number of different tools to be able to do that. So we are working on that, but at present there isn't a lot of data to work with. We've drilled only 47 holes of our own prior to this program, and even though there have been some holes drilled by other people, the assay results and even the collar locations of those holes in some cases is somewhat unreliable. We would not be able to use those results for a 43-101 resource, and so it's not really data that we should be putting into a model like that. And so until we get a sufficient amount of data of our own that would make the model more comprehensive and something that we're more comfortable with, it would be premature, I think, to put something out at this point. But I think by the end of this drill campaign, we should be in a position to do that.
The next question is, how has COVID-19 impacted your operations?
We've been quite fortunate in Nevada, actually, in that Mineral County is quite sparsely populated, and I think there has only been a few cases in Hawthorne, which is the nearest town, and the largest town at about 3,000 people. So, our guys live locally, and they just drive out to the project. It's about 12 miles away. It's very close. And so they were able to work underground with the sampling all through the initial phases of COVID, when other places were being locked down, and then even when the drilling started, we just try to make sure that people follow the proper protocol for social distancing and other precautions. And it's a relatively small team, and as you can see from the photos, it's a very open area. And so the guys have been able to continue operating, and we haven't really felt the impact in Nevada at all so far. Hoping that continues. But in Ontario, as I mentioned, it's a different case there, and primarily because of the impact of COVID on the First Nations communities up in Northern Ontario, which are quite remote, and the potential impact has been such that they've been a little bit overwhelmed by all of that, and unable to process the permit applications that the various companies have sent in. And so the First Nations have asked the government to put a temporary hold on issuing any new permits for exploration in that region. And so until that temporary hold gets lifted, there's really not very much any of the companies can do for working in that area, unless they already had a permit in place. So we're in a bit of a limbo situation in Ontario right now, but hoping we can still get in there before the weather gets too cold.
The next question is, are you still mapping and sampling the underground workings?
To some degree, yes. The guys are mostly focused on the drilling at the moment, but there is additional work to be done in the underground workings, and so when they get breaks in the drilling, they're going back to continue with that work. And at some point, I'd like to get another team in there as well to continue on with that, even as we're drilling. But yes, there is still work to be done, and we're continuing with that.
And then the next question is, are there any seasonal limitations in Nevada?
Not really, no. This area is not in the high Sierras, as you can see. It's very dry, so there's really not very much snow in the wintertime. It can get quite cold, mind you, and we usually get a very strong wind blowing through there. So provided you dress for the cold, there really is, there are no limitations to working here year-round.
And the next question is, are comparisons to Round Mountain reasonable?
Well, I think in terms of the geology, it's similar. But as I mentioned, Round Mountain is one of the largest gold mines in the world. So, I don't think anyone should expect that we're just going to go out and find another Round Mountain. That's obviously, everybody would like that. But, in terms of a model, it's the sort of thing that we're looking for in terms of similarities and the controls on the mineralization, the rock types, and that type of thing. But there are certain features that make world-class deposits, And those are just a combination of features that occur in one spot. If these were everywhere, then they wouldn't be special. So I'm not anticipating that we're going to find another round mountain, but as a model, it's something that we can certainly use, work with.
Well, Bob, that is all the time we have today. Thank you for helping us get a better understanding of the company's story. If you would like to access our independent research on Newrange Gold, please go to channelchek.com and type the company name or the ticker NRGOF in the search box located in the top left company data section of the site. A recording of today's virtual roadshow will also be available on Channelchek. Again, thank you to our guest, Bob Archer from Newrange Gold.
Thanks very much, Mark.
I would also like to thank all of you from the investment community who have watched today. Log in for more virtual roadshows on Channelchek, brought to you by Noble Capital Markets. Goodbye for today.